Next up, I have a beautiful speaker who I had the opportunity to meet in person and give her a good big squeeze on my last trip in Austin very, very recently. So, hello, Shameria, and so good to see you. Welcome to the stage.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we do.
Awesome. I thought I would
How
channel my inner Ray today. See, I put my hair to the side.
I love that blue. You certainly channeling that blue energy that we have on the cover of the book. How are you feeling today, Shameria?
Anxious, nervous, excited, all of the above.
Becoming an author. You became an author overnight.
Yes, I did. I did. Too excited. I'm like, let me go read my own book.
I know. I can't wait. Like, honestly, something is very, very special when you receive a book. So, this is our volume one. Unfortunately, volume two, I left it on the plane on my last trip from London. So, I was looking all over the house looking for the volume two and I couldn't. But how special is when you hold a physical copy of your own book?
Yes.
And you read, and I read my own story in the manuscript once it got pulled together, and I cried because it's so significant to be able to open up about our stories and share. And I know, Shameria, for a woman who has been in the military, it's even harder to get vulnerable and share your story in the way you did. And I just want to commend you for going there, going and being vulnerable because for, when you are in the military and you can speak on this more, um, we're expected to be tough
Right.
women, right? Tell us, how was that having to open up about some of the experiences that you've never shared before and having to go vulnerably to tell your story?
So in my talk, I really was going to hone in on that, but I can do it now.
I will do it for
When
official introduction, but I just
yes,
want to
yes.
kind of get the insight.
Whenever whenever you serve in a population where you're like, 1 in 30 in a formation of men, formation being a military term, obviously, group of people, it's difficult sometimes for you to come back to being a natural woman. So I spent 20 years in the military, and to try to take that journey and then come back to myself was very difficult. So this writing journey helped with that tremendously because it is very hard. You're not allowed to share emotions. I think the first time in the military I cried was in basic training. They give you like 1,000 shots. It feels like 1,000 shots. It's like 7 or 8 to catch you up to series you've never had, but they hit you in both of your arms. And here I am, like a barely 18-year-old girl, getting stuck with all these needles, and my arms hurt after about 2 days. Well, after that, anything about the military, they're like making you do push-ups and screaming at you and doing all kind of crazy stuff, and your body is hurting. So I dropped some tears while I was down in the push-ups. And my drill sergeant was like, "Are you crying? Are you crying?" And so from that point forward, they never saw me cry again. You will never see me cry again. And
Oh,
so that's been like my entire life. I will never cry in front of people. So trying to get out of that mindset and come back to a place where you can just be yourself is hard. But I got there.
yeah. Oh, wow, Shamaria. I want to officially introduce you to people who have not met you today. And if you are here to support Shamaria, let us know that you're here. Give us some flowers, fire up the chat. But I'd love for you to meet Shameria Ann Davis, who is business coach focused on helping CEOs and business owners get clear on their business strategy, branding, and their winning business model. Having spent the last 2 decades in health and wellness, life and business coaching, Shamira is highly experienced in supporting her clients in finding the answers they are looking for. In the Women Thrive book, Shamira opens up about her journey through military trauma, domestic violence, and abuse that helped her find her strength, her courage, and determination to thrive in business and life. Today, Shamira is a mother of two and has a beautiful relationship. She just got engaged in the process of writing this book. Oh, let us see your ring.
He's
And
probably on here smiling.
I love how your story has evolved and where you are today. And I can't wait to hear your talk. So, Shameria, over to you.
Thank you, Ray. So I will start with really why I decided to write this chapter. And I touched on it a little bit talking about the military journey that I took, but really it started in therapy. Um, I was sitting in a session right after I got ready to retire, like right before I got ready to retire. I thought, okay, I've spent 20 years of my life doing all these amazing things, but also that leaves a lot of baggage behind, ways that you have to stuff down your emotions and different things, and ways that I really see life that a lot of people around me didn't really see life the same. Trying to figure out, okay, why is the way that I see everything through the lenses that I see it through so different than everybody else? So I went to therapy. And in doing so, the therapist uncovered a lot of ways that I was handling life that seemed to her a little off kilter. But to me, it was like, and most of the people around me thought the same way, but many of those people were military. So family members and really close friends that I've had through the years, they didn't see things the same way that I did. And dating was a crazy process right after I got divorced in 2017. So between 17 and this year, there's been a lot of serial dating, you would say. My patience is thin. So it's probably a surprise that I'm engaged because it was definitely a crazy time. Um, so I sat with a therapist and I would work through, anxiety symptoms and some depressive symptoms. And she started to see like a trend in the way that I did life. She was like, you are very what they call hypervigilant, a person who is always a step ahead, trying to avoid certain things or trying to prevent certain things. If life is really, really hard, dealing with a person, you find out a way to not deal with that person. Or if somebody's really bothering you, you find out ways to avoid them. And a lot of this is what you would call hypervigilance. And then it also has other things attached to it, like me worrying about my kids drowning when they have never drowned and no one's ever drowned, as I mentioned in the podcast. And so she asked me a series of questions and she started with, she was like, I'm going to do this questionnaire. It's going to sound strange, but I'm going to ask you these questions. There were a lot of them. I mentioned some of them in the book, but some of them that I don't mention is her asking me, have you ever been violated? Okay. Answers no. Have you ever been sexually assaulted or touched as a child? And she would go into different questions, and those questions will start to trigger me a little bit. And then after a while, I start to have this flood of memories. So I think about what Emily just said, and she's standing in the middle of COVID with a mask over her face, which when she was talking about that, it makes you think about the mask suppressing your face. It's almost like being restrained, which is also what happens when you're being raped in many cases. She mentioned, the pillow. Well, none of that really resonated with me because I had trapped those memories back in the year they happened, which was in the early 2000s. So in 20 years, almost 20 years from the day that I started talking to her. But I get this flood of memories. I also remember some sexual trauma as a child, which I don't speak about in the book. But I had had a series of things that happened through the years that just changed my trajectory. And here I thought it was because of the military when really it was that. That was the biggest piece of it. So I really was like, okay, I need to figure out a way to talk about this, but I couldn't speak audibly about it. And I still haven't, trying to be a little not emotional. I've still had a really hard time trying to talk about it. So I can write about it, but then writing my story, it was really hard for me to read it out loud. So you like, okay, I got to edit what I wrote. But it's really hard to edit what you've written if you haven't even said it. So I would start there and say, if you've been through something and you feel like you need to share, you have to find a way to reconcile it with yourself first. So I've recently started going through cognitive processing therapy. That is because during this journey with my co-writers, my sisters, there were, we had calls at least once a week. We'd sit in these calls and it would trigger emotions. I'm usually the quiet one of the bunch. I don't usually speak too much. And sitting in there, I started to write the poem that's in the book called Triggered because lots of things were coming up for me. And the therapy was something that I needed to start over, but in a different way. So I started cognitive processing therapy recently that walks you through the things you've been through and it teaches you to write it out so you don't have to talk about it. And when you are able to write things out, that's your first step in healing. As you can see, I've been choked up this whole time. And so it's still not something I can speak about. If you want me to go into details, I just can't do it. But I can write it all day. So working through that has been therapeutic and very healing. You think you've healed from something, as Emily said, you're like, I've dealt with this. But you may have thought about it, but you haven't really dealt with it until you write about it. And writing is just, it's like art. You find the words on the pages. You can give yourself more details. One of the funny things about writing with editors like Ray and Paige is that they will say, and how did you feel about it? They make little notes in where I wrote. Well, how did you feel about this? Okay, that happened, and then what? And it makes you dig a little bit deeper in a place that you didn't really want to share from, which is difficult to be clear every single week to do that through our process. And even after we finish editing, we've been together as a sisterhood, walking into these chapters and really trying to pour out so that the person reading can get a strong understanding of what the writing journey feels like, but also what the healing journey feels like through the writing, because it is definitely that. I made some notes for myself. So I feel like the things I want to highlight for you are the pieces of my story and how I lay them out. And I start with high school. I mentioned before that I have had sexual trauma as a child. I was 8 years old. That's something I've been working through in therapy right now. So maybe you'll see that in a future book, but I'm not ready. Um, but then I move forward into high school. I break out in high school, this particular chapter. And I talk about a high school boyfriend. And much to my dismay, it wasn't signs that I would know at 14 years old what was happening, or 15 years old that this was aggression or whatever label you want to put on it. And as you read through this book, you'll probably have the same thoughts. Like, reading it is one thing, and people will say, well, how did you not know what was going on? And how did you not know that this was, crazy behavior? But what 14-year-old really knows what abuse looks like? What 14-year-old really knows what the signs of it looks like? That relationship would follow me through college and even after college, after marriage, and after children. And I don't go into all the details in the book, but that relationship trauma followed me for a while. And so did he in the form of stalking. And it took a really long time for me to be comfortable with myself and to feel safe from something that started at the age of 14, which is a very young age. You would think, how would it follow you that long? But it definitely did. And so I felt the need to write about that to lead up into the story that I shared about the military experiences. And in childhood, there were a lot of things that I observed, and I talk about those things, which is, domestic violence. And so it's just been a crazy 40 years for me. Up until a few years ago, it's been crazy. And there has to be a way for you to release the things that you've gone through and to be able to talk about your stories in a place that is both enlightening, but gives you the opportunity to remind yourself that you're human. You're going to have human experiences. Everybody goes through something. Some people's story is worse than others, but all the same, you've got to find a way to walk through it and not stop in the middle of it and pitch a tent, as many people will tell you. You have to figure out how to tell your story without saying to yourself, which we often do, and compare ourselves to others and say, well, my story wasn't as bad as them, so it's okay. Or, well, they went through more than I did, or some people will try to tell you, well, what I went through was worse. It doesn't really matter how bad something is that you go through. And it doesn't really matter how it affects other people. It only matters how it affects you and how you move forward from it. Your story is your story. No one can take it from you. No one is supposed to dumb it down. And no one is supposed to tell you what you are to do or what you're not to do, how to do it, when to do it, why to do it. That's all yours. And so if you struggle through any of the things that my sisters and I have told you about, and you've had an opportunity to even think about writing, I would suggest you do it, whether that means that turns into a book or it's just for you to process what you're feeling. It's something you need to do. And in the book, the poem that I wrote, writing is not something I decided to start doing during our time, editing the chapters. Writing is something that I've done from a very young age. And I have my very first poem, which is at the age of 13, which does make it into an additional book that I am releasing after this book has made its entry today. But I feel like that writing that I did as a kid prepared me for this. They say God is preparing you for such a time as this. There's no way for me to have known at 13 where my journey would end up at 40, or to know that what I started at a very young age and trying to write would then manifest itself to me being a great writer later. Somebody else's journey could have started at 20 and they write their first book at 25. But my journey started many moons ago, and I'm grateful for it because it allowed me to get to this place. And I've thought about the impact that this book would have on my children, who I have two boys, three once I married my amazing fiance. But having all sons and then having a story like this out there, I hope it will resonate with them like it should resonate with any male figure, that assault is not something to be taken lightly. Domestic violence is not something to be taken lightly. Threatening behavior, stalking behavior. These are all things that women go through on a daily basis, and they're not to be taken lightly. And so I hope that a woman who's been affected by this understands that it's never her fault. I'm still struggling with blaming myself, which is hypervigilance to the 10th power. And I still find myself saying, when I'm emotional, like right now, and trying to keep tears inside, that I'm somehow failing myself, because what I want to portray is a strong woman, which I know that I am. But for whatever reason, the military has told me not to cry. And so I've gotten to a place where I don't do that, but it's definitely necessary to do. And it's definitely something that I have to do. But any woman that's been through these kind of things, we tell ourselves whatever story we need to tell ourselves to protect whatever internal image we're trying to project of ourselves. And it's never a good thing when we do that, because we start to really suppress who God made you to be. Everything that you go through is for a time that God can use what you've gone through and put you in front of somebody that you can help, even if it's one person. So do me a favor and grab your copy and enjoy it. If you're in the healing journey, may it soothe your soul. And if you're not yet and you need to get there, hopefully we give you some steps to kind of get that journey going for yourself.
Shameria, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations for being here and opening up about your story. And you've spoken a lot about this has not been an easy journey. It's been a journey. It's been a journey. And somehow everything in the end starts to make sense, like why you are here and what you've had to go through. And I'm excited for you to start sharing your story, not only in writing, but in speaking. And I know the more you go into it, the more empowered and courageous and confident you will be, because this is what's going to change some lives. And I want to see in the chat, how were you impacted or inspired by Shamaria's story? I want to say some encouragement, because being a speaker and speaking, I noticed personally, because when I started this event today, I was too afraid to go into my story. And I'll be honest, I was too afraid to go deep and raw right at the beginning, to go into the depths of my story, because it's not easy. It's
No.
not easy. What um what motivates you to do this?
Really, for me to be the best mother and wife that I can be, I have to process the things that I've gone through. I have to be able to reconcile them within myself, and I have to be able to come out of it without the carrying the depression with it, or carrying the anxiety with it, carrying the heavy emotions with it, or carrying avoidance with it. So it was really my family that pushed me to do this, my immediate family. And what's most important, they need a whole version of me.
Yeah, yeah. So much love for you. Uh, and now that your story is out there in the world, how do you hope to impact somebody's life, or what transformation or legacy do you want to leave beyond the book?
Really, my legacy is impact, and it's pretty simple. You reach one, they reach one, and you've impacted the world. That's really always my goal. It's to make sure that I have an impact. It's to make sure that people that need me know where to find me. And it's to make sure that what people need to hear, they're getting. And the
Yeah.
only way to do that is to give it to them.
Yeah. Uh, Shameria, what's beyond the book? What's beyond this book? I know you have something else coming up very soon.
I have my own poetry book. I mentioned speaking and writing since the age of 13. So there's a poetry book that will come out this weekend called Divinity in Our Lives. And the digital copy will be released this weekend, but the actual paperback book day is on a very special day, which is July the 7th. It is the date of my divorce. It is my mother's birthday. And it is also my favorite number, which is also God's favorite number, which is seven. I love my sevens. So the paperback copy will be available on the 7th. And I'm just really excited to be a double author for the first time.
Amazing. Mention the name of the book again so people can take a note.
It's called Divinity in Our Lives. Same name. So when you go and search for it, you'll see both books. If you search for me as an author on Amazon, you'll find both books in a couple of days.
Wow, amazing. I'm sure it couldn't have been easy to not only write your story, but also to prepare your poetry book along with the launch of this.
Yeah, it was nerve-wracking. So then I was like, okay, I think I know what poems I want to share. I've written a ridiculous amount of poems through the years, as you can imagine. But trying to dumb it down to like 30 or 35 poems because I didn't want a really big book. I'm like, how many of these poems should I use and which ones? But through this writing, I recognize that some of my poems are more emotionally available than others. It's probably because of whatever mindset I was in. So if I was in a really good mood, it was probably a very broad poem. But if I was like hating the world or mad at somebody, it was like a crazy poem. And so I'm like, which ones do I put in there? So this process really changed some of the ones that I wanted to put in there because I started the process for this poetry book back in 2018.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. This would be a good time for someone to take a screenshot and tag us on social media. So go ahead, grab your phones, take pictures, celebrate these brave, courageous, inspirational women has gone through an incredible process to be here to share their stories. And I welcome you to give them their flowers by taking pictures, adding them on, sharing that on social media, tagging them. And Shameria, I'll ask where is the best place to connect with you in the moment. But this is a great opportunity to grab yourself a copy of the Women Thrive book, grab yourself a digital copy on Kindle, grab yourself a paperback that is available already. We weren't expecting that it would become available today, but so it is here, and we're so thrilled. And if you can, grab yourself more than one copy and share with someone in the world that you know, and I think is going to be impacting so many lives. Shamira, how do people connect with you on anywhere?
Anyway, the easiest way to connect with me is from my website. So it links you to all of my social media pages. That is www.shameriaann.com. I think they're going to put it in the chat, but just
I
get on
will.
there and connect. And if you're trying to figure out what's going on with me, then that's how you do it. And if you're on here and I know you, I better see a screenshot on Facebook.
For sure. What's your Instagram handle?
Shameria Music is my personal one, and my company is A Davis Consulting.
A Davis Consultant with
Shameria
underscores.
Music is with a Z. I am a Zeta, as most of you know. So if you're looking for Shameria Music, make sure there's a Z at the end of music.
Shameria Music, amazing. Well, Shameria, as I said, I had the opportunity to meet you in person in Austin a few weeks ago, and it was just so amazing to have that time together after we've spent months going through our authorship journey. And I just want to congratulate you. Congratulations on becoming a two times author now, all in one, and for being so courageous to share your story with the world. I celebrate you.
Thank you, Rain. Thank y'all for coming and joining us and listening. Hopefully, it was something very helpful, useful for you.
Yeah, for sure. I can't wait to see you speaking on more stages and sharing that story bit by bit. As I said, this is a process of peeling layers and really stepping into our power and purpose of sharing our stories. So, Shamaria, this is just the beginning of an incredible journey for you, no doubt.
Thank you, Rain.